Some NBA fans love the Winning Time show, and some people hate it. All I know is that this is the first time that we've seen a live-action show where they're portraying an NBA team or player of the past. We've seen movies of this before. I remember watching in middle school the movie The Pistol, The Birth of a Legend, and that was the first time I've ever heard of Pete Maravich. We saw this in school because I live just outside of Clemson, South Carolina, and that's where his childhood took place in the movie. So you can say it was part of our history. But a TV show, I can't really think of this happening before. So season 1 is talking about the 1979/80 season. It was a rookie season of Magic Johnson. It was a year that the Lakers won his first championship since 1972, and it was a year where Magic Johnson had one of the greatest performances in finals history, in Game 6 against the Philadelphia 76ers. That is a brief summary of their season. But let's talk about where they should be ranked among the greatest teams of all time, according to the all-time greatest NBA book written by yours truly. After gathering all the information I could on this team, I decided to rank them 37th all time. I have them ranked just above the 1981 Boston Celtics and the 1973 New York Knicks. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. From a statistical standpoint, there's nothing earth-shattering to discuss, especially from an analytical standpoint. Here are some of their per-game numbers and the advanced team stats that they put up that season. Even to the standard of the Showtime Lakers in the 80s, is nothing special. However, what helps their case is the fact that they won 60 games in the regular season and they went 12-4 in the playoffs. What also helps their case is the immense talent that they had on their roster. This team had 4 All-Star caliber players, including one Hall of Fame player who was past his prime and was a dangerous six-man player, in every sense of the word. We'll get to that later. For example, they had Jamaal Wilkes, who was their second leading scorer. He averaged 20 points per game on 53.5% shooting. For over a quarter of the games, you had Jamaal scoring over 20 points and shooting north of 60% from the field. That is a great luxury to have on your team. Norm Nixon was, believe it or not, the leading assist man for the team. He was a point guard for the Lakers. That might sound like a head scratcher looking back at it now, but the reality is that they didn't know how to utilize Magic Johnson yet. He's 6'9" and Nixon is 6'2". In just about every case, the shortest player is always the point guard. So they were probably asking themselves, am I allowed to make a player who could be an undersized power forward running the show? He was an enigma that they later were able to fully unleash. But even in his rookie season, he made a huge difference for this team. In the previous season, with the exact same core, the Lakers won 47 games. In comes the Magic Man, and they won 13 more games. This team had something that no other team had: 2 All-Star caliber point guards running the show. That means that you're going to create a lot of easy shots for your teammates. So it's no surprise that the Lakers had the best offense in the league. But what you might not know is that the Lakers ended the season shooting 52.9% from the field. That is currently the 3rd highest field goal percentage that a team has shot for a single season in history. They also racked up 29.4 assists per game, which is the 13th highest average in NBA history by a team. And if you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then your team efficiency is going to go to another level. He averaged for the season 24.8 points per game on 60% shooting, 10.8 rebounds per game, 4.5 assists per game, and 3.4 blocks per game. Not exactly dominant numbers, but he didn't have to take the scoring load for this team. As we can see, they had plenty of offensive weapons, but his numbers were good enough to help him win the MVP award. What also helps their case is their playoff performance. Most notably was their Western Conference Finals series against the defending champions, Seattle Supersonics, where they were able to showcase their dominating offense and at times underrated defense. The best example of that was Game 4 at Seattle. The Lakers were down by 21 points at the midway point of the 3rd quarter, and then the Lakers went on a 24-2 tear to take the lead before the quarter was done with. Keep in mind, the Sonics were a top 3 defensive team in the league, but there was just no way that they could contain this team for an entire game. Magic Johnson was the king of starting legendary runs. He could push the pace better than anyone in the history of the game, and before you know it, either the game was now out of reach, or he just helped his team come back from a deep hole. It's all part of the greatness of Magic Johnson. And they also get credit for the way they defended Dennis Johnson in that series. He averaged for the series 17.4 points per game on 40% shooting. That was largely thanks to the trap defense that the Lakers implemented to shut down DJ. If the Sonics were going to be successful, they needed both Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson to play well, and the Lakers did a good job with containing DJ. Now in the finals, the Sixers were just as good as the Lakers were. They ended the season with 59 wins compared to the 60 that the Lakers won. And I think Kareem sensed that his team was going to need him to step up his game if they were going to beat this team. And he gave one of the greatest and honestly, probably the most underrated finals performance ever. He averaged for the series 33.4 points per game on 54.9% shooting, 13.7 rebounds per game, 4.6 blocks per game, and 3.2 assists per game. That included his heroic 40-point performance in Game 5 while playing with a sprained ankle in the fourth quarter that sidelined him for the remainder of the series. But he still made some big plays down the stretch. But the Lakers were now facing a big problem. They had to go on the road to try to win the title without the captain. And that's when Magic Johnson took over and gave us one of the greatest performances ever. We're talking 42 points on 60% shooting, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block. And as we all know, what makes this performance even more legendary is that he played all 5 positions throughout the game. But there is an unsung hero from this game. People forget that Jamaal Wilkes also had a career night. He ended up scoring a career high 37 points on 53% shooting. And that couldn't have come at a better time. So that just shows how deep this team was. The fact that even without their best player, they had multiple players that stepped up in a title clinching game on the road. And that's something that is rare to see. And there's another piece of proof that shows how deep this team was. They had a total of 3 players that averaged over 20 points per game in the finals. Kareem, Jamaal Wilkes, and Magic all averaged over 20 points. The only other team since the merger to have accomplished that are the 1987 Lakers and the 1987 Celtics. That's the list. We also need to note that this was done against the best defensive team in the league that season. The Sixers had the best defensive rating in the league, so that makes their accomplishment even more impressive. But there's some glaring holes that should be taken into consideration. First off is their bench. There's nothing special about their bench play once the playoffs came around. They had Michael Cooper, but it should be noted that he was in his sophomore season, so he wasn't at his peak yet. Their best bench player during the regular season was Spencer Haywood. He averaged nearly 10 points per game from the bench. Then the playoffs came around and he played his normal role in the first playoff series against the Phoenix Suns. But all of a sudden, he started playing less and less until he just disappeared. It was reported that he was sleeping during practices because of that sweet old nose candy. So the team decided to sideline him, and he wasn't too happy about that. So he plotted to kill his coach. But you know, that was the 80s. That's just what you did during the time. And it was fine. I mean, there was some consequences. He played in Italy for 1 year, and then he came back to play 2 more seasons in the NBA. So the GMs were like, hey, if you promise not to kill our coach and not sabotage our season by going on a coke binge and sleeping during warm-ups, then you can have the job. No, but Spencer, gotta promise me now. Okay, you got the job. True story. So he played for the Washington Bullets for 2 more seasons. So anyways, the Lakers couldn't rely on their bench much for production. And then Jim Jones, the starting power forward, was a liability on offense. We're talking about a 6'11" player who averaged 7.4 points per game on 40% shooting in the playoffs. the Lakers had some holes in their roster, but the Stars did more to compensate for the lack of depth that existed beyond the 4 key players that we mentioned. So in the end, I had them ranked as the 37th greatest team in NBA history. Keep in mind that as legendary as Magic Johnson is, he was only a rookie. This was the worst version of him, not including the 1996 version. So that also has to be taken into consideration when viewing this team historically. This was a solid season, but I don't think that anyone would really put this team among the best of the best. So who do I have over them? Buy the book. You can get the full list and analysis of these amazing teams in the first 2 chapters. The links are in the description box for you to get your copy. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.